Welcome. Welcome to the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency podcast, Civil Rights and You, the show that focuses on federal, state, and local civil rights issues and how they impact your daily life. My name is Charles Bryson, Director of the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency under the auspices of Mayor Lottie Cruson, and your host. Play as always is our intro theme is Ronnie Jordan After Hours, and this podcast can be seen at Facebook Live and recorded at mycitymymusic.com. So I want to thank you all, my guests, for being here today. We've been doing a series that's focused on trauma and toxic stress, and it's based on a series of articles by former Post-Dispatch reporter Nancy Cambria, who's on the show, I think, a couple of weeks ago. Today we want to talk directly about African-American boys and men, African-American males, and how toxic stress and trauma may lead to other issues later on. And I've got three gentlemen with me who will introduce themselves and a little bit about that background, and then we will have a discussion. So I'm going to start to my far right, I guess. Tony, if you'd introduce yourself.
Good morning, and thank you for having us. I'm Tony Neal, President and CEO of Educational Equity Consultants. I spend a great deal of my time working with Yateman Union Sarah Mental Health Center as a psychologist, and I've worked in the prison system as well, and also been adjunct professor at Webster University.
My name is Muhammad Rakib. I am with Real Men Talk Motivational Empowerment Group. I have 30 years working with youth, families, schools, and communities. Right now, I mentor about 100 kids throughout the United States and Central America and Belize. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Salim Kenyatta. I am an educator for the Review Garden School District. Also adjunct instructor and just overall worker for the community.
Thank you all for being here. Tony, I want to start with you. I've known you the longest. So let's talk about before birth and children in the womb and how trauma and therefore toxic stress play a role, what may happen over the next 10, 15 years of their life, and how that plays into both how they view the world and perhaps how the world views them.
Yeah, certainly. I think, if we're going to even address stress and trauma, we have to address the care of the mother during her pregnancy. What does that really mean? And that starts with, what is the mother eating? What is what type of environment does she live in? What is the nurturing aspect taking place around motherhood? What does she think about the pregnancy? Was this a rape case? Was this a traumatic case for her? Because it could have been traumatic for her, and a lot of that will transfer to the unborn. So that's another way to look at it and to think about it. So those are some of the things that you have to look at. What type of stress, and how can you identify what some of the stressors are? There's many mothers that are overworked. I know a lot of mothers that work up until the very last day before they give birth. And there should be some time of relaxation, some time of meditation, some time of just being away from the daily stressors that many face. Whether you have other children in the house, sometimes that could create some stress on a newborn that has not entered the world yet. And so all those conditions shape what happens when we see that brand new baby boy or girl that enters the world. How does he or she start to move forward and embrace the wider world?
When you talk about these stressors, are there any programs very specific that are out there now that work on that issue, that really begin to say, how can I take this mother while she's pregnant and help her physically, psychologically, sociologically, so that I can relieve some of that stress and tension?
Well, there are a number of clinics. There are a number of community centers. I'm thinking about the Phyllis Wheatley YWCA. They have a number of programs. Certainly, one of the other gentlemen here, Salim Kenyatta's wife, runs an excellent center, the Emerging Wisdom Center, and he can talk about that. And there are certain programs that take place there. There are some school programs, the community programs that are based in the schools. Very few.
Are they clinics or are they just community-based programs?
There are some that are both.
And I know that's
there are some that are both. I know Jennings School District, they have some clinics that are based there, and they do some of this type of work. But then there are other after-school type programs for parents. I know at one time Parents for Teachers, who was running some community programs. Of course, funding is always an issue, and so the types of programs that help kids really grow in the community, that's where the funding usually gets cut, when we talk about cutting funding. So, yes, there are some programs. There are fewer programs now than there were in the past, and certainly that's the area that we can start to look at when we talk about funding.
I know it was very odd. My Facebook page today popped up. Today or this week or this year is the 30th anniversary of Caring Communities.
Yes.
And I remember that was kind of the model people had been gravitating toward, to say, how can we in specific neighborhoods change the pathway for our children and our adults.
Right, and Caring Communities is working very well. And as you know, when things work very well, specifically for us, and I say us being people of color, sometimes those programs get redirected, or funding gets redirected, and they don't have the same magnitude or the same capacity to do some of the work that they've done. But yes, Caring Communities, excellent program, excellent program.
Mohammed, you are in a bunch of different countries. I'll say that way. We can change that. Are the issues different by country in terms of working with, because they're not black boys in other countries, but are some of the issues similar? Are some of the issues very different? And what are those differences?
Going to Belize in Central America, the issues are pretty much the same, but there's more extreme poverty in Belize. So they don't have a necessary welfare system as we do, where people can kind of lean on the system to get food stamps, housing vouchers, and things like that, Section 8. They don't really have that there. I was in one community to where they were brought a box, big bag of rice, some meat, some cans of beans. And they had to last a whole week for maybe a family of 10 people. That's very different here in that case. But because of a lot of the people down there are from United States, and they get deported, so they have the gang issue, they have the drugs issue, they have the crime issue, they have the violence issue. So those things are the same. But I said, as far as poverty, the poverty is much more extreme in Belize. So it's the have and the have-nots, to where we have middle class, lower middle class, upper middle class. We have in-betweens here.
Does that create more stress for that kid and family? I'm not being facetious, but if I'm not expecting as much of a hand of assistance, does that not change my dynamic? And look, we got kids, we got this box, we've had this box last week, we're going to have it next week, this is all we have to deal with, versus being in the United States, and the pathway looks like some days we're doing really well and some days we're doing really poor, which really, I would argue, might cause more stress because of that, versus there's a straight line. We're going to get this box every week. Let's learn how to deal with it.
One thing about Belize, it made me appreciate life more. I had to stop complaining about my experiences growing up and my little bit of poverty growing up, because I seen kids with no shoes, and they said they don't have no shoes to play.
Never had shoes.
They have one pair of shoes, and that's for school. That's it. So they was running barefooted playing basketball, or they were playing soccer. So there's an appreciation level down there, and a humility down there, and a humbleness down there that I don't see here. I see a lot more entitlement here, a lot more arrogance here, even in poverty. So definitely down in Belize, definitely more appreciative, nicer, but there also is a big ocean right there, so they can go fish and go get their lobster. So they can eat lobster every day. Extreme poverty, but eat lobster every day.
Yeah.
Eat shrimp every day.
Yeah.
To where, going to the grocery store, a lobster tail may cost $30.
I remember living in Baltimore, and they always had those crates full of crab, and I'm,
Wow.
St. Louis crab is like $100 a pound.
Right.
There, it's like, you got $5 on you? You're like,
Oh.
and here would be the crab. So I can understand that difference.
Coming back from Belize, I stopped complaining.
Did you?
I stopped
Salim,
complaining.
go ahead.
Let me add on to that, because
Make sure you're in the mic.
in my travels, I've had opportunity to see struggling communities in Bahamas and Philippines, in Africa. I did a study abroad in Ghana, West Africa. But as he said, they may not have the assistance that we get. However, they have the skill and the collective culture to go out and they farm, they go out, they fish. So even though you have a box, you also have these other opportunities that are self-sufficient, and you can go out there, as you said, and get the lobster. You can go out there and fish, and then they're more collective. So if one person doesn't have, another person adds on. Whereas with us, we try to get it in this country. We try to get it and maintain it for ourselves. Whereas more indigenous cultures from globally, they're taught to help the next person out. So if I got a box of food, I'm gonna help the next person out and make sure they got something to eat.
So when we talk about stressors on families, it is more, what I'm hearing you kind of argue is, it's more individualized here.
Yes.
Than your neighbor is going to help you in some of those other countries that you've been to.
Yes.
Here it is, I'm struggling. How can I get out of this predicament? Family may not be of much help, or may not want to be of much help. It's sort of a question statement. But it seems your argument is there you have some loosely woven connectivity to others, which may reduce some of that overall stress of the family.
Yes.
Would that kind of the we Uzi concept. Dr. Robert Williams, at one time from Washington University, described the we, us, and I as a we Uzi, the collective family, the collective mind set. And I think, you see that sometimes in other countries where there's poverty. Over here, it's more of an I, or just our small little group, as opposed to a collective group. Yeah.
So I want to get back to focusing on, I guess I want to start with Black boys. So I come out the womb. I am whatever age I am. I guess, what are the expectations, both internally, meaning in the family, and externally, meaning society? I hate to use the term Black boys, but I got to do that. What's the expectation, and how do we address that? Anyone?
Well, I think initially coming out of the womb, we have high expectations, or we see high expectations. Now, what you see and what actually transpires as that kid is growing, or as that young boy is growing up, kind of changes sometimes. We can see that in some of our schools, and I have an opportunity to work across the United States in school systems, and we can see sometimes how expectations are lowered.
Yeah.
And I think there's a righteous intention behind it. Little Johnny didn't have breakfast this morning, so he's, has his head down on the desk, and that's okay for an hour or two. And it's not. There's a righteous intention that, poor little Johnny or poor little Tony. However, we have to hold those expectations. Little Tony didn't have breakfast, and we can give him a bar or something, for a time being. But he needs to be engaged in class. He needs to be engaged in rigor. He needs to be engaged in activities that have high expectations.
So what do you mean by righteous intention? Are you saying that I, as a teacher, understand your plight, and therefore I will allow you some degree of discretion?
Well, you can put it that way. Or, I was a high school principal in East St. Louis school district for a short period of time. And many students would arrive at school late because they had to get their siblings off to school. Sometimes there were 6 siblings, so they stayed home as the parent who would stay home with the little child who is sick. And there were a plethora of other things that were going on in that child's life and that young man's life where he could not get to school. And so when he would arrive to school, the teachers would think, well, he had to do this for his little brother, or he had to do this to help mom out. And so it's okay that you don't have your homework, or it's okay that you are behind, so you can take 4 or 5 weeks to, catch up. And those things are not okay. So we have to have a balancing of how do we keep that particular child engaged at a high level, and the school should help to provide some support for that family. That's one thing that we did have at SIU, at the charter school, is a number of support mechanisms. There was if a child, some of our teenagers had kids. And so if they had kids, there were services there that those kids they had a babysitter basically, those kids could go to a daycare center. We had opportunities for kids to be able to wash their clothes there. There was the Upward Bound program that provided the support that some students need to stay engaged at a high level. And all of that was there on campus. So that was that was a village concept, moving those kids forward and holding high expectations. And we had the young men like us sitting around the table that held kids, held especially our black boys, to a very high expectation. I mean, I'm sure each of us could tell a story about some of the young men that came into the school and where they were when they arrived and entered the school and where they are now. We were just talking earlier about one of our young men who just received his master's degree from Rutgers and just got accepted into the PhD program and came from a very troubling, situation. Yeah.
Say his name.
Yeah.
Say his name.
Terrell
Gilkey.
Yes.
Yes.
So I hear you saying two things. One is the expectations are high at the beginning. They should stay high.
They should stay high.
And we as a society need to find ways to bolster, if that's the correct term, or support those youth at those early stages so that, well, if I didn't turn in my homework this week, maybe I don't need to turn it in next week or the following week.
Right.
And then I'm falling downward down that slide that I may never recover from. But
I want to call it expectations with empathy. Okay, because that's what he taught me. Because I had a rites of passage program working at the same school he was working for SIU East St. Louis Center. I was working with the CREA Upward Bound program.
Yeah.
And my rites of passage was Real Men Talk rites of passage, and working strictly with boys. And I had all these expectations, so I would vent to Mr. Neal all the time. I would come into his office, complaining, just all kind of emotional stuff that I had going on in my own personal life, plus working with these boys. And he taught me to have expectations for them, but he also taught me to have empathy. You can have both. And the both is what get these young people through, because they got so many situations coming out of East St. Louis that I didn't deal with coming out of Washington, D.C. The resources I had growing up in Washington, D.C. were way different than what they have growing up in East St. Louis.
So we have to give license to people to have empathy.
Yes.
What does that look like in terms of I am allowing you what? I'm allowing you to say, this child did not turn in their homework today. That's okay. Just make sure they turn it in tomorrow. What does empathy look like?
Empathy is
Closer.
Empathy is you care for the student. You still have to place the high expectation on them, and you also have to be committed and be consistent to that expectation. If the project is due today, hey, listen, you got to be in here today. Now, what I'll do is I'll come in early, and I'll assist you at 6 o'clock.
And you will tell them that beforehand.
You have to. But what it is if you keep letting people slide, keep lowering the standard, then what happens is the skill becomes watered down, and they don't get the skill. So you have to model what it is that you want them to do. Hey, I'm going to show you how to do. I'm going to show you. I'm a carpenter, and I'm also a cook by trade, along with being an educator. And being a cook in the military, I was in the military. All right, we didn't have time because I was a cook in wartime. We didn't have time to have low expectations. If a meal is not there, then the soldiers are not supported, and then we're going to lose the morale of the soldiers. So we have to be consistent. So we don't have time to water anything down and weaken it. We have to be consistent. Now, some people may say, well, what Johnny has. Look at his circumstance. What you do is you try to assist and support that circumstance. If Johnny has some issues at home, then you support you create programs or link and connect Johnny with the trio programs, with the male support programs, or you link Johnny with some coaches so Johnny can play football, Johnny can play basketball. You follow what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And then what you try to do is you try to have a relationship with the parent and ask them, hey, listen, Johnny's not doing too well in this class and he's not turning in his work. How can we work together? That model comes from a sociological term that's called the three-legged stool method. In order to support our young people so that they can sit on top of the stool, there are three legs there. And each leg represents the community, the school, and the parents. But if one is weak, what happens is the other two have to support that part of the leg. So as a school, sometimes we have to support the parents by bringing in other resources. And when you're able to do that, then the parent feels a little bit more engaged to come up to the school and to go above and beyond because she knows she or he has support. You feel me?
Yeah, I want to get back to that in a minute, but I want to talk about you've run groups for young black boys. What were they talking about? What were some of the issues that they raised?
Main issue is fathers, absent fathers. Mm-hmm. Then the second issue is angry mothers. Or stressed out mothers.
Rightfully so.
Yeah.
Okay. The third issue. I said fourth. The third issue is people don't understand them. Teachers, community, life. Then the fourth issue is the community. They got the gangs.
So let's go back. They realized that they were missing. There was a hole in them because they did not have a father that was a regular participant in their life.
I've done a 1-hour motivational empowerment session, and kids were calling me dad. A 1-hour session, just met them, and kids were calling me father. It happens all the time.
Mm-hmm. Because that's something that they needed.
That's something.
Rephrase it. Something they wanted.
Something they want.
And that was important to them.
Yeah, and that transfers over to adulthood. Mm-hmm. You know, I run a black male support group, and we meet often. These gentlemen are a part of that. And some of the conversations that we have had, you can tell stem from some of the experiences that each has had as a childhood.
It's still there.
It's still there.
And it's still very much a part of who they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the second one was angry mothers.
Angry mothers.
What does that mean?
The mothers are stressed, okay, for various reasons. They've been abandoned. They may have chosen wrong, right? The father may be in prison. He may be dead. Or there just may be relationship issues, relationship problems. May be volatile, right? There was very, very few Cosby homes or happy homes, very few. That is the minority in the kids that I work with. Mm-hmm. Other people may work with something different, but in my community, where I work with, there's very, very few Cosby families because, of course, the programs I work with are low income, first generation. So you have to be a certain type of kid to be eligible for those federally funded programs. So,
did those kids sign up for those programs voluntarily?
We recruit, but most part, yeah, they come looking for the programs, but we also recruit.
And did you know? Hold on. Did you notice that they attended on a regular basis?
Yes, so that's a lifeline for them
because they needed it.
Yeah. They need that.
It's a place of family.
It depends on the person. All right, we both work for a similar program, and
Get a little closer.
I remember a lot of the students talking about Mr. Muhammad, and they were saying that man, he was an outstanding guy, and because he nurtured them, he was able to create activities, and these activities ended up bringing in students. So I mean, a lot of students came just from the fact that they saw a lot of engagement in the program. And likewise, when I came to the high school, East St. Louis High School, and what I did was I created awesome programs, awesome events. I brought in guest speakers. I took them on college tours. I took them to step shows, and there's different activities within the community. What happens is when you do that, the program markets itself. Mm-hmm. You don't even have to market the program anymore because they start seeing it because you have shown, and you have proven through your consistency that you are skilled at doing your job and you have compassion. And if you can do that, again, the program markets itself.
Students are the best recruiters.
Yes.
So what age did you start working with? What was the age range that you worked with?
My age range, if you look at the TRIO Upward Bound program, you're talking about 13 to 14.
Okay.
To, of course, 19. If you're looking at the TRIO Educational Talent Search program, you're talking about fifth graders coming into the summer program. So you got some fifth graders that are 10, 11, so as young as 10 or 11. Then the educational talent search program, the CREA educational talent search, goes all the way up to 27, because we work with GED students and dropouts, high school dropouts.
Are there programs, anyone can jump in, are we missing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds? Are there programs for them? Are there places for them to go? And very specifically, I'm not talking about sports, I'm talking about nurturing.
Head Start. At SIUE East St. Louis campus, we actually, they called it the diapers to diploma, right, at that campus.
I used to be a Head Start director, so yeah, I know that very well.
And Mr. Neal was very instrumental in bringing all these a lot of these resources and making sure that we had a lot of these foundations within that community.
But there's no real programs here in the city, county, region that address the needs as they see it of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds.
Brother Neal?
As we're speaking about that, I'm trying to think of some of the programs. There are small programs, and I can't say that there's programs on a large scale.
Better Family Life has programs.
Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of small scale. But in terms of similar to the TRIO programs, but the TRIO programs are reaching the masses, if you will, and they have built capacity. We don't see that. I think that's an age range that we're starting to miss, and that's a very critical age range that we have to engage. I
mean, so part of this was based on the work of Nancy Cambria, and one of the stories in that session, those articles around trauma and toxic stress had to do with how do we intervene early enough so that the brain sort of remolds itself away from a fight or flight mentality, but a more nurturing mentality. And if you all, and I know a little bit about the two of you, if you all don't know of programs that are addressing those kids at that age, then that's a huge problem.
Yeah,
because I don't want to see a kid at 10 and try to remold them at that age versus 3, 4, and 5.
Right, and I'm not saying that I don't want to give the impression that no programs exist, because we can look at the YMCAs and some of the community centers. I know Webster Groves Community Center, they had a specific program, but it's not just on the...
I'm not going to let you finish that.
Okay.
Because that's not a nurturing program. That's
Right.
about sports.
Well, sometimes it's about sports. For the most part, yes, it's about sports. And sometimes sports is their way of entering into that kid's life. So you can enter there, and certainly you can expand what you're trying to do or how you're trying to reach that particular kid. So yes, you're right. And I do think we have to get away from that sport entertainment mentality of thinking that's the only way to reach black boys. Yes, absolutely. But sometimes that's the door of entry to making it happen.
Because where's my yoga program? Where's my Tai Chi program? Where's my just sit on the ground and meditate program? Where's all of that stuff?
But also here in St. Louis, you have like I'm starting to see a development or an evolution of various drum programs. So there's a drum program here, and they do African drum called the Spirit of Angela. And they bring in young people as young as 3. And Africa Kilolo, that's another drum program, and they start at the age of 3. There's also a dance program that is headed by Nicole Pinky Thomas, and it's called Pinky's Academy, because my daughter's in that program, and my daughter started at 3, and it goes from 3 all the way up until 13, and many of her students have gone and stayed in dancing, and they went to Coca, and from there Alvin Ailey Dance Theater. You feel me? So there are many programs here. You have to investigate these programs, and and see if the program is advantageous for what it is that you're aiming for.
But again, we should acknowledge, because the whole other side of this conversation, Louis, is all the things that are going on related to crime and homicides and shootings, etc. And I don't hear this conversation being part of that conversation, which means somewhere there's a disconnect from what we know in terms of studies around trauma, toxic stress, the fight or flight mentality, to where we are with, well, how do we deal with the crime issue sort of without dealing with the mental health issue?
You know, one thing I think we are not addressing is what can we do to better equip the teachers in that young age that you have identified to address some of these issues. Because no matter what I teach, if little Tony arrives and he's not in a place of wanting to learn because of some of the trauma or some of the other stressors that are going on in the family, I'm not going to engage. And so what does that look like in the classroom? And that's not just like 1 or 2 students in the classroom. I'm all over the schools and all over the U.S. into schools, and you see massive students in classrooms that are not engaged, and they're going through some things, and the teacher is stressed because he or she doesn't know how to deal with that. Mm-hmm. You know, all I know how to do is to teach math, or all I know how to do is to, teach this particular subject.
And why should something else be placed on me that I am A, not trained for, and B, not paid to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, because you want these kids to move. That's part of the job. I say being an educator is not a 9-to-5 job. I'm sorry, it's not. I would arrive as a principal. I arrived at school at 6 o'clock in the morning and wouldn't leave to 7 and sometime in the evening. It's just not a 9-to-5 job. You have to be intrusive in young kids' lives. And sometimes that means not just teaching, but I'm going to little Tony's soccer game, and I'm going to, whoever's dance studio, and I might do a home visit. And, so I'm showing that I am really encouraging these students, and I'm immersed in his or her life. Yeah.
So I want to get back, because I missed 3 and 4. So fatherhood is one, stressed mothers, because I have to go to work today, and you leave, and then people will say, "Oh, you talked about angry mothers." And the third thing that kids talked about. Do you remember what that was?
Dealing with schools that are stressed out. Mr. Neal perfectly said it. If you don't have teachers that are equipped to deal with these kids that are coming in from broken families, let's just say the families are broken. Okay, parents are not together, people are not sticking together, families are broken. So the kids are coming to the school. That adds a layer of stress to the teachers. And like Mr. Neal said, if they're not equipped to deal with that, because in our program, I had a therapy day. People didn't like me doing that, but I understood that if the kid is going to be successful in class, you got to deal with those underlying issues that people don't like to talk about. So we would blindfold the kids, had them sit back to back so they really couldn't see each other, and they would pour out some of the things they had going on in their lives. And this was very, very successful. Kids tell me to this day, "Thank you for that session, Mr. Muhammad."
So they were allowed to
speak out, say what was going on, and they poured out. There's some mean things that have happened to our babies. There's some horrible things happen, especially our boys and girls at very young ages.
Were the teachers in the room? Were the school counselors in the room? Were the principals in the room?
Teachers that work
so
with
they
the
got to
upper
hear
bound
that
program,
as well?
counselors. I mean, it's a crying session for everybody. Everybody's crying. Everybody's emotionally broken because, wow, we need to do this. And now other teachers that were in the room are doing it at their schools. Mr. Muhammad, hey, I did the blindfold session with my kids. It really works. It's really helping them. And they want it every week, one day of the week. So there's just one day where they get that session to where, okay, they're allowed to pull them out because the teachers are not equipped. They're just, if we look at the national scale, the teacher's not equipped to deal with it. And then you got 1 or 2 social workers, 1 or 2 counselors in the school to deal with a whole group of kids, 400, 500 kids.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Go ahead.
To add on to that, I used to work at Dunbar High School in Chicago. Awesome experience. I had Fundamental Fridays, and Fundamental Fridays is during the week we would pick a topic, and on that Friday we would have activities, and we would actually go deep into the subject. And my job was just to facilitate and moderate, but the students are the ones who actually engage Fundamental Fridays, and it was so successful that many students made sure, no matter what, even if they were sick, to be there on Friday, because we're talking about issues that relate directly to them, relationships with themselves, relationship mating with their families, and how to repair that and empower that, how to get into sports, how to volunteer, and also how to empower them economically by bringing in people to show them how to make money. once you start showing a young person how to make money that's legal, as opposed to illegal, they start listening. And then you also giving them that group therapy. You know, it opens them up, because a lot of times at their homes, they don't get a chance to have these rap sessions because mom is too busy, dad is too busy. But when you come to school and you know, you create an activity where they all won't be judged, and then you have a person that's moderating, so one person doesn't hog it, or one person doesn't abuse the other person, they feel more empowered to engage.
What age group were you working with?
My specialty is from 6th grade all the way up until 25. So that's from like 11 to 25. That's what my main experience. Now, I do have experience from 3 to 11, but my main experience, what my passion is from 12 all the way to 25.
Okay.
You know, I think we also have to look at how we socialize our boys growing up, because as young men, as young boys, we're told not to cry.
Yeah.
You know, don't cry, don't show your feelings, live in a box. And, you know, when you get enough stuff coming in, enough toxins coming in, enough stressors coming in, then at some point they're going to explode. And what is it?
Masculinity.
Absolutely. And what does that look like when that explosion happens? You know, so it should be okay for young boys to cry. You know, we can talk about some of the narratives that are put out there. You know, big boys don't cry. You hear that. I'm sure we've all heard it. You know, you fall down, you get back up, act like a
You're
man.
right. You're all right, ain't you? You're all right, ain't you? No, I
act like a
broke my
man.
leg.
Yeah,
No,
right.
I'm all right.
You know, so those types of things. You know, I mean, we put that on our young men.
But isn't that part of our young men need to be men sort of phenomena? Because there's not, we don't see some of those fathers as being real men. They may have been sperm donors, and they may have been Mr. Feel Good for the night, but they're not people that are going to run my house if I'm a female, or run my community. And so we are already grooming boys to be men far younger than they should be.
Yes. Oh, of course. I mean, and how do you define manhood? When you say, you know, grow up and be a man, what does that really mean? What does it really mean to be a man? You know, does it just mean that, you know, you father kids? Yeah.
Breadwinner, and
absolutely. You know,
another sperm donor.
We have to define that. We have to define that.
And there's some odd ways on Facebook that we do that. We talk about men dressing masculine versus dressing feminine. We talk about how you see somebody with a nice car and a nice clothing. You say, "Oh, I wish I had that man," as opposed to meaning that if he has all the trappings of these things, then he must be a true man. And so I think we do miss the boat on a lot of that conversation. And then now, to be a man, you have to have a gun.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to be willing to shoot somebody. So I want to get back. You're going to be my favorite person today. But it's actually to the two of you around the age to which you listen for change in voice. I have a note here somewhere in blue that says, oh, here it is. Are we not allowed to be kids anymore? So at some point, I may have been a child, but at one point, do you hear kids now trying to become a man? And is that getting younger each and every year?
I see it getting younger each and every year, definitely. When I first started, I've been doing this since I was 14 years old. I was blessed to get a job with the Marionberry in Washington, D.C., his youth employment program at the age of 14. So kids were kids. They were running, they were playing, they were just babies. They were kids. Now, when I came here in 2004 and started working with the CREA Upward Bound program, I see this level of maturity where kids were boys and girls, but boys were responsible for their siblings. They were responsible for, some of them had to get a job at 16 and 17. I got to support my mom. I want to do this to support my mom. I want to go to the NBA. I want to rap. I want to support my mom. A lot of stuff was about supporting mom. I want to help my family. I want to support my family. So at a certain time in their lives, I would say around 15 to 16, they stop thinking about kid things and they start thinking about kind of these adult things to where I got to support my mom. I got to do this. I can't go to college too far because I'm going to be away from my mom. So everything was about supporting mom. I've seen a lot of that with my boys. What age would you guys say?
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay.
I agree. with that.
And that's the crossroad age, because you don't have a lot of experience to be a male. However, as
And you don't have any history
Yes.
of males,
and especially
good males.
yeah, and especially if you don't have these males in your family, you at the crossroads. So you could bend off and actually go into a dead end because you don't have someone in your life that's actually showing you what manhood is. And then just to go back a little bit, the community, because we have to bring the community into it. In certain societies, they have the elders within that community, and the elders, they dictate and articulate, hey, these are the expectations of what a man should be. And actually, we're going to show you, and we're going to guide and teach you and link you up with mentors that's going to show you. So they'll show and prove to you, so you'll know how to adapt and also how to actualize. Being a protector, how to be a provider, how to be a guide. But now we don't have a lot of that because the elders are so stressed out. Once they retire, a lot of them just want to just relax. So we have to go back to the communal model and bring our elders into it so that they can help us identify what it is to be a man and also support us in our manhood training and also our young lady womanhood training, because we need to train both of them.
But so I would argue half of what you said is we do have quote unquote elders in our community. They just may not be the people that we want to teach and train.
Yes.
But they got them.
That's true.
And that's part of that joining a gang is that's now my family because they're going to protect me. They're going to defend me. They got my back. They teach me how to make money.
Yes.
They do all of those things. We just don't appreciate how that's happening in our community.
Well, it serves a purpose to an extent. All right. And you're talking to an individual whose family is well versed in the gang lore and the gang experience. And myself being coming from Chicago's West Side, you didn't come out of my neighborhood. You couldn't be in my neighborhood if you didn't belong to a gang or played baseball or or was in some type of program. And I would go and say that it was the first level of social fraternity that I experienced. However, I ended up taking it to the next level and exposed myself to other experiences and engaged in other social programs. So I kept getting that fraternal bond outside of the gang with mentors, and then from there, other fraternal organizations. So they just need a little bit more structure. That's what I'm trying to say.
And we as a community, and maybe the 30th year anniversary gives us both a reflection and a possible move forward. We need to guide our young men and women. You are absolutely correct.
Yes.
Thank you. But our young men to particular people in the community, not let them pick them on their own.
Yes.
I'm wondering where does the church come in all of this? Because at one time, the church, at least in my community, I grew up in Texas, right outside of Houston, Texas, and that was a safe haven for the young black boys. We look forward to the youth groups that were part of the churches, and the playground. That's kind of where we all gathered in the evening and played our basketball or foursquare, whatever it was we were playing, and that became the safe haven. But I don't see churches engaged in that way in young black boys' lives anymore. Not to say that they don't exist, but I'm just not seeing it on a large scale.
Well, I think two things. One, I'll say this, I think a lot of pastors are afraid to have these young boys up in the church. Secondly, I had Dr. Cynthia Rogers, I believe is her name, on the first show that we did in this segment, in this series. And she basically said, we'd love to work with churches. She was at WashU Medical. She said, but you can't pray this stuff away. And therein lies part of that conflict of what are they going to do while they're in there?
Yeah.
And if they're not going to be working on that young male to guide them in a particular way, other than well, here's the Bible, let's study it,
Right.
then the child's not going to go, because you are not speaking in a language that I understand. My mom didn't go, my grandmother didn't go. Why should I go?
Yeah. And I guess I'm not suggesting that you can pray it away.
No,
but
I clearly heard her saying.
Right.
Now, next week, the last one in the series, there's Behavioral Health Network is coming on, and there actually is. It's called Bridges of something, and I can't remember the rest of it. But basically, that's what they do. So they have specific churches in specific neighborhoods that are trying to do the behavioral health part of what this conversation is. The other thing about Better Family Life that they do is they're trying to do mediation in certain churches. So some churches are active. One, does the church really know how to be active other than to try to pray it away? And I'll say that again. Secondly, are the churches where the kids are? Because if you're not, and we talked about this before we came on the air, we have an amazing amount of children south of like Gravois Park neighborhood, not necessarily on the north side, but there are some. Do we have active churches that are trained and responding in those particular neighborhoods, especially what is the Hayden Triangle? Do we have active churches there? Now, there's also a group that was on a couple of weeks ago, Alive and Well. So again, you have some of this weaving of the tapestry.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know how forceful it is. I don't know, do they drop flyers off on everybody's door? If you're stressed, if you've got emotional issues, if you're whatever, and timing. You know, if these kids are getting up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's their first part of the day, and they're not going out till 7, 8 o'clock at night, if the church door is locked, they're only going to try it once.
Yeah.
So I think there are some issues that we do need to explore moving forward.
You know, I also wonder, are we addressing the wrong issue? And I asked that question because not long ago I heard Jeffrey Canada speak from the Harlem Children's Zone out of New York. And he was asked, what makes your schools in your area successful? And he said, we go in and we address the problem, not the behavior. And so, you know, that's the root. And so many times we see individuals or communities addressing the behavior. These kids, it starts with these kids or they're doing, and we're not really getting to the root. And so, are we addressing what we need to address?
And that's what you just said is just so paramount, because we have elders in the community and they say just that these kids, they don't pull their pants up. It's always a problem, as opposed to saying, hey, there are some kids who are actually doing some good things out here. And there's some kids, even though they may gangbang, I know gangbangers who actually do some bad things, but they still respect people who respect them. And if you come to them and you're respectful with them and you address the behavior, not the person. So, Kamal, you did something bad. Let's talk about what you did, but you're still a good person.
Absolutely.
And how do we correct that? Correct the behavior, and also how can we establish some type of habits that will help you out? How can I work with you? When a young person's seeing that you will work with them, and you're not going to always be down on them, it makes them want to open up and engage more, as opposed to you're creating a divide and you push them away, and you don't. You're part of the rap music. I don't listen to rap music. I don't do that stuff. And we've gotten too old, some of us. And we have to create the bond and connection with these young people and let them know, hey, we respect you and we need you.
Yeah.
When I was doing my Rites of Passage program in East St. Louis, I was also working on my master's. So my Rites of Passage program coincided with my master's degree, and sometimes I had to get approval from certain kids to go to certain neighborhoods. So I had to get the validation. It's that gang validation. So even the kid is gang affiliated or he's a gang banger. So I would ride around with certain kids and I would take pictures of certain sites, gang graffiti, things like that. And one thing the kids showed me, look all these churches, Mr. Muhammad. They're not doing anything. These churches are not there on every corner. They're not doing nothing for us. They're out of touch. And we don't want to hear that old stuff. They need to get like Pastor Granger. Remember Granger?
Mm-hmm.
Pastor Granger. That's New Life Community Church, 1919 State Street.
Right.
Now, I went to the church. The kids took me to the church. Some of these gangbangers that go to church took me to his church. This guy's hip. And he understands the hip-hop language.
Mm-hmm.
He understands the youth. He's young enough, probably in his 40s. I'm 44, so probably in his 40s, to understand how to reach them. That church is full of young people, full of young people. He got Men of Valor. He got all type of programs that he's doing because he met the kids where they were. And some people are not willing to do that. Okay, they're out of touch. I don't want to deal with those kids. I don't want to touch those kids to where growing up, my father was Baptist. My father said the church was involved in everything. Nothing happened in the community without the church. The church was very powerful and very strong. The church pretty much funded the Black Power movement, the Civil Rights movement, all those things.
Absolutely.
So the kids exposed me to that, driving around these neighborhoods. Some St. Louis neighborhoods, I rode around with kids, and they showed me certain things, and they're like, hey, the churches are not doing anything. And this is from the kids' mouth. But then certain churches are, but it's not enough. When you got all these churches in East St. Louis probably got 100 churches, we counted. The kids took me around. Way more churches than banks. Now, you go to Edwardsville, where I live, Illinois, there's more banks than churches. Right?
Wonder why.
Okay? But they don't have the problems that East St. Louis has. So you see, we got all the spirituality. We got all the church. God is there. But it's not moving nothing that we need to move with our young people.
So we have about 8 minutes left. I want to talk a little bit about black men as adults. Stress is being here. I'll ask a stupid question just to get that moving. Is being a black male stressful? Yes, I asked that question. Don't look at me like that.
It's definitely stressful.
Why?
Oh, yeah.
How?
The man thing. In our community, manhood is very, very different. Manhood in our community is ultra masculine. So I told you I live in Edwardsville. Okay? A lot of the white guys, when they with their wives and things like that, they don't look ultra masculine. They don't look strong and dominant. Okay? Some of them look meek. Some of them look humble. Some of them look nerdy, geeky, things like that. They still have their families and they're still married. But in our community, you got to be a man. You got to be the big dog. And that's very stressful, to be the big dog, to be in charge. And you got to be better than him. Okay? You got to have sex better than him. You got to have more money than him. It's a competition.
Even
thing.
if he's a black male.
Even if he's a black man. You got to
Or
be
even
better
more
than,
so that he's a black male.
more so that he's a black man. You have to be better than the next man. So it's the competition thing that really is very, very stressful. I'm Muhammad. Nobody can beat me on this planet. I deal with the power of self, right? I've been blessed to be me, right? And the power of you is what God allows me to be in this vessel, in this only body. But that doesn't matter. A lot of women don't want to hear that. Can you be better than my ex-boyfriend? Are you going to be better than this guy? I dated this guy. This is what he did. I dated a Muslim. And you going to be like him? You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of competition. That's very stressful. That competition thing is the most stressful thing for me as a black man, that I have to compete with other people. I catch the bus. I caught the bus over here. What if a woman doesn't want a guy that's on the bus? I got to compete. The education don't matter, and the fact that I don't have no criminal record and I don't have no biological children running around. I have an adopted daughter, but I don't have any biological children. That doesn't matter. I'm still on that bus. And the other guy, even though he sells drugs, he has a car and can pick her up. So that competition thing is very stressful.
Slim.
Man, how do you piggyback off that?
I'm sorry. Because I wasn't getting ready to respond.
There's a lot of stress out here, but there's a lot of opportunity out here.
Do we put stress on ourselves?
We do.
Knowing that these situations occur?
A lot of the stress is sometimes we can't let go of the ego. And when you're able to let go of that ego and just, I was taught to submit to someone who knew more than I did, But you got that hyper masculinity does not submit to nothing but ignorance. So if we can train that to say, hey, listen, if you want to do better, you got to know better. And if you can do that, you may have a little bit more in life. So sometimes the stress goes with ignorance. when you don't know. And as he said, competition. Why do we have to compete when we can just come together and work it out together? One of the superpowers of the dominant culture is their ability to unite. If we can develop that superpower instead of competing against each other, because that competition creates crabs in a barrel. If we can just say, hey, listen, let's stop competing to get out the barrel. I'm gonna help you get to the top, and then you put your hand back down, and we both get out together.
Out the barrel.
So we have to work together.
Heck yeah, it's stressful. It's stressful being a black man in this world. Every day I walk out the front door, I wonder if I'm going to make it home tonight. And you can be in all the right places, and especially what's going on now here in St. Louis, you can be in all the right places, and something still goes wrong. So it's being stressful. I think what these two gentlemen talked about is the law of scarcity. And once I get to the top, it's not enough room for all of us to be at the top. So I'm going to put you down. I'm going to push you down. I'm going to make sure that whatever I'll do, I'm going to stand on your head to keep you down. But the other part of that is that I got to be down with you to keep you down.
There you go.
And so how do we come together? I think it's said best in, the Willie Lynch letter, although I don't know if it's authentic or not. The content of what it's saying is how we have put each other down. The light skin versus the dark skin, the male against the female, the old against the young. All the ways that we have oppressed one another. And we have to understand that is the manifestation of the racism that exists. That's the internalized racism that we're dealing with. Anytime a group of people are systematically oppressed, we will internalize that oppression and pass that oppression on to individuals who look like us, other people of color, other black men. And so, hell yeah, it's stressful. It's very stressful.
But that stress, if you learn how to manage the stress, that stress can become a blessing, and that blessing can come into a teachable moment and a lesson. So I've taken a lot of these stresses and managed them. Now they're lessons, and they're teaching me how to be bigger and better.
And I noticed fairly recently the number of African American men that are dying between 45 and 55, and dying, literally dying. I would argue possibly from stress or the life that they have to live. And I'm not talking about those folks who were shot, but I'm noticing that, and I'm 60, going to be 61 in August. But I'm noticing that and thinking there were no. So let's go back to the earlier conversation. There's no outlets. These folks were living and dealing with all of these stressors day after day after day. And now that they've made it to the top, it's possibly even worse. And they're keeling over.
Yeah, we talk about microaggressions. I call those things microcontaminants because it eats at the heart of the soul. Small things like, what am I going to wear today? Who am I going to meet with today? Because I have to make sure that I'm dressed right. I have to make sure I'm on time. I got to make sure that all my I's are dotted and T's are crossed as I walk into this boardroom with where all the board members are all white.
Because that's your shot.
That's absolutely. And you only get one chance to do it right. That's stressful, day in and day out. Another person might think, well, that's just small. But when you have to do that day after day after day after day, that's really stressful.
And the stress, now we're seeing the stress. People talk about black on black crime, but that's stress. That's stress, that's poverty, right? That's lack of economics. But we're also seeing this new thing. I don't know if you heard about the 4 little girls. More little girls, but Trinity Jones, 9-year-old, found in a duffel bag in Los Angeles. People trying to figure out who she was, and they arrested the mother and I think the stepfather of the mother's boyfriend. Malia Davis, that's the little girl, stepfather may have killed her. In Texas, they're looking for her body now. I don't know if did they find her body. I'm not sure. Then there was Zoe Pariah, 3-year-old, burned alive. The biological father chained the car, locked the car with a chain, so she couldn't get out, and burned her alive. Then the 17-month-old Nariah Brown, that was sexually assaulted when her mother left her in a hotel with a family friend, and she was so brutally sexually assaulted she died from those injuries. So we have these black men. And it was very taboo to talk about molestation in our community, child sex in our community.
Don't go visit Uncle Willie.
But now it's happening. These stresses are coming out in this brutal behavior. A young man got killed at a party. You heard about it in Venice, Illinois.
Yeah.
They shot at a party. Some of the kids said 30 to 40 shots at a high school prom after party.
Yeah.
And this young man was looked at from Mizzou in Illinois, already in 8th grade.
Football player.
Football player.
Football player.
Got McKenzie, I think it's McKenzie,
Right.
Jalen McKenzie.
Right.
He got murdered. And the kids were calling Mr. Muhammad, I can't get it out of my head. I can't get it out of my head. The kids had post-traumatic stress from that incident. They were breaking down walls. They were kicking in doors. They were jumping over gates. They were running. The people were shooting while the police was there.
Yeah.
That's stress. Only a stressed out, hurt, broken people can do that to each other.
But then they can't find who did it.
Yep.
So, that's part of...
That's part of, yeah.
Yeah.
That's part of that stress. They can't tell. No snitching.
So we are a little over time. I want to give each of you all a closing comment before I close out. Whoever wants to start first.
Well, first, I just want to thank you for even raising the topic, because we are not having these conversations and we're not even raising these topics. And I hope that the conversation will continue. And those brothers that are interested in our Black Men Speak Out conversation that we hold every 2 or 3 months, I just ask that you would inbox me or inbox Mr. Bryson, and we would love to have you continue the conversation with us.
Yeah, if they send me an email online, I'll make sure I forward it to you.
I appreciate that.
I think that the community should thank you, and we thank you for allowing us to have this opportunity, because these are taboo issues. We're told don't talk about it. But I was told by Elder the problem is the solution. Okay, the doctor doesn't come and say what's the solution. The plumber doesn't come and say what's the solution. The car mechanic doesn't say what's the solution. They ask you what is the problem. And from the problem, they fix things. And we got to start getting into fixing problem-based solutions. What's the problem? Okay, let's fix a problem, like you talked about Jeffrey Camden. Let's start fixing some of these problems, because the solution isn't a problem. All right, and I want to give a shout out to Imani Rice of Passage. That's Mary Dunlap. You look her up, Imani Rice of Passage. They're doing a lot of good work with young men. Imani Rites of Passage.
Yeah.
And also Brother Sylvester Brown,
Oh, yeah.
former Post-Dispatch commentator.
Sweet Potato Project.
Sweet Potato Project.
Yeah, just
so
had
give a
it.
shout out, because
Imani
they're doing a
Rites of
lot of good work with young people. Imani Rice of Passage right here in St. Louis, and Sweet Potato Project with Sylvester Brown. Doing a lot of good work. They're doing a lot of these issues.
Okay. Let's call.
We got programs out here, and I want to thank you guys for mentioning those programs. You got the Sunshine Drummers. I'm a drummer, so a lot of that stuff that I do, I love drumming. Sunshine Drummers, the Spirit of Angela Drummers, Pinky's Academy. I'm also a coach for a program called Gentlemen of Vision, Rites of Passage, that is ran by Christopher Randall and Marlon Wharton, and they're doing excellent work mentoring these young guys, and I'm one of the coaches and mentors for the young guys. So we need programs for these young guys. We need committed people. If you can't get involved in one of these programs, create your own program. All we got is us. And if we don't pour into the community, we can't expect the community to get better.
Thank you all, gentlemen. I may have you on at some other time soon and pick up on where we left off. We are out.